My name is Captain Kim, an F-16 pilot in the Republic of Korea Air Force, ROCAF. In the pilot community, I considered myself one of the old dogs, having accumulated over 1,000 flight hours in the F-16 Block 52, a platform we affectionately call the Fighting Falcon. I have flown in all weather conditions, participating in countless joint exercises simulating the most intense scenarios on the Korean Peninsula. I grew up with the heroic images of USAF pilots from movies like Top Gun and technical reports from Aviation Week and Space Technology. I was fully aware of the legacy of the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy and their celebrated combat history. When I was selected to participate in an officer exchange program at a USAF Air Force base under the Pacific Air Force's PACAF command, a hub where USAF fighter jets like the F-16 and F-35 operate daily, I was confidently arrogant. An F-16 is an F-16, I thought. This airframe has been in my hands for almost a decade. I can fly to anyone's standard. But then I had a personal, shocking realization that I will never forget. It was the moment I watched an American squadron operate, pilots who were younger, perhaps with less accumulated time in this specific airframe than me. I thought I knew the F-16, but when I saw an American squadron operate, I knew I had just been in kindergarten. This is the plain truth. We in the ROCAF are skilled, we are disciplined, hardworking, and we fly a lot. But the difference wasn't in the wings or the engine. It was in the culture, the process, and the mindset that had cultivated these world-class pilots and maintainers. This assignment took me to Misawa Air Base, a strategic U.S. forward operating location overseas. Before arriving, I was filled with expectations and overconfidence. I believed this would be an opportunity to prove the ROCAF's capability. But within 72 hours, my emotional status had shifted dramatically. Confidence. I am a seasoned F-16 pilot. Nothing new here. Curiosity. Wow, their debriefing culture is unique. Military culture shock. This is not just flying. This is a living combat system. Awe and respect. I must learn from this place. They are the benchmark. To American readers fascinated by the military, especially those interested in aviation professionalism and the secrets behind their combat effectiveness, I promise this will not be mere polite praise. I will recount my entire experience, detailing the factors that create this difference. U.S. fighter pilot culture, the unique blend of individual initiative and collective discipline. Squadron workflow, how they plan and conduct professional, non-negotiable debriefs. Maintenance protocol, American crew chief standards, why I believe the ground crews are the true backbone of the USAF. Training environment, lessons learned from facilities like Weapons School or Red Flag that we rarely access. The difference in mindset, an honest analysis between the ROCAF and the USAF where creativity and tactical flexibility take precedence. I am ready to admit, America helped me become a better pilot. And this is my story. I vividly remember the moment my C-130 transport touched down at Misawa Air Base. The first thing that struck me wasn't the fighter jets, I was already familiar with them, but the operational rhythm. The moment you stepped out, you sensed the atmosphere. It was an astonishing combination of speed and standardization. Ground vehicles moved at the regulatory maximum speed, but without any rush. Every crew chief was in the right place, their flight suits clean, their toolkits perfectly organized. The sounds at Misawa were a symphony of professionalism. The roar of F-16 engines, the hum of power generators, and the precise click of test equipment being connected to the jets. I realized something profound. Discipline here was unspoken. Everyone knew their job so well that they didn't need constant reminders. This was the standard of American military professionalism I had only read about. This standardization, from signage, procedures, to attitude, created an environment where errors were eliminated before they could manifest. The squadron I joined was an F-16 Block 50-52 unit. The most surprising observation was how much younger they seemed compared to my ROKF peers of the same rank.
Captains, lieutenants, even some majors, many had the faces and demeanor of recent college graduates. However, that youth came with an incredible level of professionalism. In the mission briefing room, there were no jokes or small talk. The atmosphere was simultaneously friendly, they welcomed me warmly, and combat-focused. When discussing a simulated strike mission, all eyes were glued to the screen. Every question drilled down into tactical specifics: energy management, threat evasion, ingress-egress routes. They spoke their own distinct tactical language, a version of English coded with acronyms and terminology that sometimes left me scrambling to catch up. They weren't just pilots, they were tactical scientists. The first shock I experienced while participating in their mission planning process was, why is everything so fast? Their procedures weren't longer than ours, but the speed at which they processed information, made decisions, and reacted was double. A briefing that would take 45 minutes in the ROKF was condensed into 30 minutes here, yet packed with higher information density. More importantly, they maintained a serene composure in a highly pressurized environment. They were discussing scenarios that could easily lead to a shoot-down or mission failure, yet their tone was clinical and objective. They didn't panic, they simply calculated. The pressure was immense. In my mind, the thought kept recurring. I am a seasoned pilot. I should be at their level. But every meeting was a struggle to keep pace. I developed a fear of being left behind in the process. It wasn't a fear of flying. It was a fear of the gap in professional fluency and tactical processing speed between a Korean pilot accustomed to rigid procedures and an American pilot immersed in a culture of aggressive, rapid, and flexible combat planning. I realized this pace was not about recklessness. It was a learned, internalized efficiency, a hallmark of true U.S. Air Force operational superiority.
In the ROKAF, mission planning is structured and hierarchical. In the USAF, it is an academic deep dive with combat consequences. A typical pre-flight briefing was detailed down to the second, not just outlining what to do, but why and what if. The process of assigning roles was less about seniority and more about optimizing expertise: lead, wingman, weaponeer, comms, tactics. Every position had explicit, overlapping responsibilities. The lead set the framework, but the whole flight owned the execution. They used advanced simulation tools, projecting three-dimensional threats, terrain, and weather with astonishing realism. They weren't just reviewing the plan, they were running mental simulations, identifying the point of failure before the canopy closed. This was the biggest philosophical difference. In my culture, we value hierarchy, and a junior officer rarely questions a senior's plan. Here, the culture was different. No one waited for orders, everyone prepared at 150%. The flight leader's word was respected, but it was not absolute. I was shocked to see a young first lieutenant arguing back against a major during the briefing. He wasn't being insubordinate, he was pointing out a potential blind spot in the electronic warfare plan. The senior major smiled and immediately incorporated the suggestion. An instructor later explained, "We encourage them to argue, tactically. If they see a hole in the plan, they have a professional obligation to point it out. Tactical honesty saves lives. We would rather have a heated debate on the ground than a casualty in the air." This high degree of individual initiative and personal responsibility is a core strength of the U.S. Air Force culture, fostering critical thinking under pressure. The debrief. This is where the American fighter pilot culture truly shines, and it's why they remain superior. The room transforms into a truth chamber, where there is no deference and nothing is concealed. The session starts with the phrase, Tell me everything. Every maneuver, every radio call, every missile shot, simulated or real, is reviewed using high-fidelity data from the jets. Who made a mistake? They say it. Was it the most senior officer? They point it out. I watched a squadron commander, a lieutenant colonel, admit to a tactical error that cost the simulated mission. He didn't hide behind rank. He analyzed the data, explained his mental process, and accepted the correction. The statement I heard stuck with me. The American debrief is where the ego is crushed and skill is reborn. It is a clinical, data-driven, and utterly brutal process of self-improvement, fostering an unparalleled level of aviation professionalism across all ranks in the U.S. Navy and USAF.
Like many fighter pilots globally, I held an inherent, albeit subtle, prejudice. I believed the pilot was the center of the air power universe, the warrior who wielded the technological spear. Maintenance was simply the necessary background work that kept the spear sharp. I learned in America that this was a deeply flawed and potentially fatal perspective. When I arrived in the U.S., I realized the true strength of the USAF does not primarily lie in its advanced fighter jets, but in the ground crew. The men and women in the brown flight suits, the crew chiefs, are the invisible backbone of American air superiority. I was consistently impressed by the American crew chiefs. They were young, some barely out of their teens, but their technical proficiency was exceptional. They understood every component of the F-16's engine, hydraulics, and avionics, often speaking in more granular technical detail than the pilots themselves. Their attitude was defined by a fierce sense of ownership and responsibility. I once heard a young airman first class tell a major, with absolute seriousness and pride, "This jet is my responsibility, sir. When you're in it, your life is in my hands, and I take that seriously." It wasn't a boast. It was a statement of their professional creed. This deep-seated pride in their work ensures the highest American crew chief standards are met every single time. The American maintenance protocol is built on 3 unbreakable pillars: safety, checklist, and quality assurance, QA. Every task, from a simple pre-flight inspection to a major engine change, is a meticulously documented process. They prioritize precision over cutting corners, leading to incredible reliability. This precision, paradoxically, leads to speed. Because they do it right the first time, their jets have a remarkably high mission-capable rate. Precision, speed, safety, reliability. The entire process is driven by data, not guesswork. Their technical logs are exhaustive, and the communication between the maintenance hangar and the flight line is seamless, a true operational model for aviation professionalism. My shift in perspective was cemented by a humbling experience. Early in my exchange, I was rushing through a pre-flight inspection checklist, a habit from my fast-paced ROKAF environment. A young American crew chief, probably 22 years old, stopped me. He calmly pointed to a small detail I had missed on the landing gear strut. He didn't yell or show disrespect, but his gaze was firm. "Captain, the checklist is there for a reason. You're paid to be meticulous, not fast. Don't rush the process that keeps you safe." It was a sharp, necessary rebuke. That moment became a turning point, transforming my professional attitude. It taught me that genuine military professionalism means respecting every link in the chain, especially the ones on the ground. The USAF doesn't just produce great pilots, it produces great teams, and the crew chiefs are non-negotiable members of that elite. Before coming to the USAF, I believed BVR combat was about superior technology, the radar, the missile. While U.S. technology is unmatched, I quickly learned the decisive factor is the tactical application of that technology. The American pilots do not play by a template script. While there are standard operating procedures, SOPs, they are taught to practice free thinking within a standardized framework. We, in ROKF, tend to stick rigidly to a pre-planned playbook. USAF pilots, however, are constantly drilled on adapting, shifting formations, and exploiting enemy errors in real time. They approach BVR not as a sequence of steps, but as a fluid, high-speed chess match. The emphasis is on decentralized decision-making, allowing the lowest-ranking pilot to take control if they have the best tactical picture. The dogfight, or within visual range, WVR combat, is where the U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy truly integrate training, physiology, and data recording. Every simulated dogfight is treated as a scientific experiment. It is not a demonstration of bravado, but a tactical problem to be solved. They use advanced data logging equipment that records everything: G-forces, control surface deflection, energy state, and pilot head position. The debriefs focus relentlessly on energy management, maintaining the jet's speed and altitude advantage, and scan pattern, ensuring the pilot's eyes are always where they need to be. This analytical, data-driven approach turns the chaotic nature of WVR into a measurable, repeatable process for mastery, a clear differentiator in fighter-pilot culture. In modern air combat, few things are as difficult and dangerous as suppression of enemy air defenses and destruction of enemy air defenses. Dead. The capability of the U.S. to penetrate and dismantle Integrated Air Defense Systems, IADS, is world-leading. This success is rooted in the seamless integration of all assets. The introduction of platforms like the F-35 has fundamentally changed the F-16's role. The concept of sensor fusion means that data from multiple aircraft, F-35, F-16, F-22, are combined into a single, comprehensive tactical picture. The F-16 pilot doesn't just see his own radar, he sees the consolidated picture provided by the fifth-generation assets. This shared awareness allows the older fighter jets to operate with the tactical certainty of the stealth platforms. This isn't just about having advanced jets, it's about having a superior network and a culture that trains pilots to think network-centric first. I often spoke with my instructors, many of whom were graduates of the prestigious weapons school. Their core message was always the same: tactical flexibility saves lives. They emphasized that the enemy gets a vote. The plan will break down. The technology will fail. The only thing that remains is the pilot's trained ability to adapt, innovate, and make the correct decision under extreme pressure. This is the intellectual edge that the U.S. military holds, a commitment to intelligent, adaptable warfare.
The day I flew my first mission with the American squadron was the day my pride truly took a beating. The preparation was a relentless, 2-hour process. The briefing covered every conceivable threat, weather condition, and contingency plan at breakneck speed. I was anxious, trying desperately to keep up. I was translating the complex tactical jargon in my head while simultaneously visualizing the 3D battlefield. I felt my mental capacity stretched to its absolute limit, struggling to absorb the sheer volume of information and the speed at which it was being delivered. My mood was a cocktail of nervousness and a fierce determination to prove I wasn't out of my league. The moment we taxied out, I noticed the precision of the crew chiefs one last time, the exact salutes, the perfect placement of chocks. Our takeoff was flawless. Flying in formation with the Americans was an experience in serene competence. They didn't just fly pretty, they flew tactically to the millimeter. Their formation flying was steady, precise, and dictated by the tactical requirement of the mission, not just aesthetic appearance. Every small input on the stick or throttle was calculated to maintain the energy state and position relative to the threat axis. Their calmness was infectious, momentarily settling my nerves. Then came the simulated air-to-air engagement. We were flying a scenario against aggressors simulating a high-performance threat. I was shot down so fast that I was stunned. It felt like I had barely entered the maneuvering phase before my jet was killed. My opponent, a young pilot named Lieutenant Colonel Viper, was already turning away, having executed a flawless maneuver that left me completely energy-deprived and defensively positioned. I immediately knew my mistakes: poor angle of attack, AOA, management, slow recognition of the energy gradient, and a faulty scan pattern that focused too much on the threat and not enough on my escape options. Back on the ground, the instructor calmly analyzed every error: the exact angle of bank at the merge, the critical time I failed to assess energy management, and the faulty scan pattern that allowed Viper to sneak into my blind spot. I realized my ROKF training, while comprehensive, had not prepared me for this level of detailed, high-stakes tactical analysis. The post-flight debrief was the most memorable event of the day. It was absolutely unforgiving, not in its tone, but in its commitment to truth. They didn't just talk, they played back the video and data logs, synchronizing the feeds from all 4 jets. They analyzed every second of the flight, freezing the screen to discuss my error. My face felt red-hot with embarrassment. But instead of scolding me, Lieutenant Colonel Viper simply smiled and said, "That's okay, Captain. This is how you grow. We all get shot down. The best pilots are the ones who learn the most from their mistakes." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was electrified by the possibility of learning more. The system forced humility, but it did so in the service of true excellence, validating the reputation of the U.S. Air Force as the premier fighting force.
One of the foundational strengths of the U.S. military is its deep commitment to training. Why does America train pilots longer and with more intensity than most nations? Because they understand that air combat is a perishable skill, and true mastery requires constant pressure and exposure to diverse, non-scripted threats. Facilities like the Weapons School, Red Flag, and the Navy's Top Gun, now called the Naval Aviation Warfighting Development Center, or NAWDC, are not just advanced courses, they are crucibles for tactical doctrine. They force pilots to think beyond their single platform and operate as a seamless multi-domain system. This investment in a lengthy, demanding training pipeline ensures that the foundational competence of an American pilot is globally unmatched. The fighter pilot culture in the U.S. is remarkably egalitarian in the tactical realm. They actively fight against the culture of rank dependency. I observed how junior officers were not only allowed, but expected to challenge assumptions during the planning phase. This is formalized through processes that encourage 360-degree feedback. Feedback flows up, down, and across the rank structure. The emphasis is on the best tactical answer, regardless of who voices it. This open mindset prevents catastrophic failures born from unchallenged senior authority, a lesson learned from decades of combat experience. The principle that governs American training is simple: data greater than rank. In the debrief room, no matter how shiny the rank on your shoulder is, the data recorder doesn't lie. Their system is rooted in science-based training. Every maneuver, every decision, every outcome is quantifiable and measurable. There is immense respect for technical proficiency and factual evidence over subjective feelings or hierarchy. This dedication to objective metrics ensures continuous, measurable improvement across the entire U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy fleet. They train based on what the data shows, not what tradition dictates. The final, and perhaps most crucial element, is trust. The USAF operates like a very unique kind of military family. Pilot crew chief trust. The pilot trusts the crew chief implicitly with his life, knowing the maintenance standards are non-negotiable. Command pilot trust. The command structure trusts the tactical expertise of the pilots in the field, granting them the flexibility needed to succeed. This ecosystem of mutual respect and trust is what allows the entire fighting force, from the USAF fighter jets to the most remote logistics units, to execute complex, high-risk missions with confidence. It is a cultural advantage that money cannot buy.
On my final flight with the squadron, I was tasked with being the weaponeer, managing the weapons employment plan while the lead executed the primary maneuver. It was a role that demanded high cognitive load and tactical foresight. I executed the mission better than my first day, but I still had errors. The lesson I carried home was about perspective. I knew the F-16, but they understood it 5 levels deeper. I knew the procedures for the jet. They understood the machine's tactical physics. I could fly the envelope. They could manipulate the envelope in relation to the adversary's jet. It was a subtle yet massive difference between procedural competence and true tactical mastery. A mastery that comes from a culture obsessed with detailed, data-driven excellence. My experience redefined my concept of professional discipline. It is not about simply following orders, which we do well in ROKF. It is about the self-imposed rigor to master every detail that touches my mission. The equation became clear: skill, attitude, safety, life. My attitude towards the pre-flight checklist, the maintenance crew, and the rigor of the debrief was completely overhauled. I learned that professionalism means being your own harshest critic and holding yourself to a standard higher than the commander demands. This discipline is the unspoken commitment every American pilot and maintainer makes daily. The most impactful observation was that American pilots, even the most decorated weapons school graduates, operate with a pervasive sense of intellectual curiosity. They never believe they are the expert. U.S. pilots view themselves as perpetual students. I watched Senior Major Wrench, who had hundreds of combat hours, eagerly take notes during a debrief led by a young captain. He explained, "The enemy is constantly learning. If you think you're an expert, you've already lost the next fight." This lifelong learning mindset is the critical factor in maintaining the U.S. military's global technological and tactical edge. When I returned to the ROKF, I didn't just bring back new tactical calls. I brought back a new mindset. I immediately began implementing changes. Focus on the mindset, not just tactics. Encouraging junior pilots to tactically challenge plans. Adopting the unforgiving debrief, making debriefs 100% data-driven and objective, removing rank from the equation. Elevating the crew chiefs. Ensuring my pilots treat the ground crews with the respect and trust commensurate with the life and death responsibility they bear. My time with the U.S. Air Force transformed not just me, but how I view the future of ROKF air combat readiness. The purpose of this comparison is not to criticize my own service, but to highlight the unique strengths of the U.S. military that serve as a positive model for all allies, including the ROKF. Both forces are essential cogs in the regional defense mechanism, but their cultures yield different advantages. The Republic of Korea Air Force brings immense strength to the alliance, born from the unique pressures of the Korean Peninsula. Discipline and diligence. ROKF personnel are rigorously disciplined, highly motivated, and incredibly hard-working. Our sense of duty is absolute. Teamwork and solidarity. Driven by a strong collective culture, our team spirit and ability to execute large-scale, coordinated missions based on established procedures are exceptional. High proficiency on home turf. We possess intimate, non-transferable knowledge of our terrain and threat environment. The superiority of the U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy lies not merely in spending, but in their cultural and procedural frameworks. The debrief culture, the ability to ruthlessly dissect errors without fear of rank or reprisal, the ultimate engine of continuous improvement. Maintenance protocol, the American Crew Chief Standards that prioritize technical ownership, precision, and mission-capable rates above all else. Flexible tactical thinking, training pilots for decentralized adaptive decision-making instead of rigid adherence to a template. And individual initiative, empowering junior personnel to speak up when they see a tactical flaw, maximizing collective intelligence. The alliance works precisely because we complement each other. Example, red flag exercises. When we train together at exercises like red flag, ROKF brings disciplined execution, while the U.S. brings innovation and operational flexibility. We are pushed out of our comfort zone of scripted missions and forced to confront the fluidity of advanced coalition warfare. The U.S. provides the intellectual framework for global, technologically advanced air combat, while the ROKF provides the dedicated, highly disciplined defensive shield in the Pacific. Our differences are not flaws, they are synergistic advantages that strengthen the alliance and ensure our combined air power remains dominant against any adversary. The U.S. military's culture of constant self-critique is the most valuable lesson they offer their allies.
My time embedded with the U.S. Air Force was the most professionally challenging and rewarding experience of my career. I arrived with the belief that I was a seasoned expert in the F-16. I left with the humbling knowledge that I was merely proficient. The education I received went far beyond flight maneuvers. It was a masterclass in professionalism, organizational culture, and the science of continuous self-improvement. My respect for every American airman, from the young crew chief to the decorated weapons school pilot, is absolute. To the American public, those who love and support the U.S. military, particularly the U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy, I want to share a truth that often gets lost in geopolitical headlines. You are not perfect, but you are the model that the rest of the world strives to emulate. Your ability to constantly question your own standards, to openly criticize failure in pursuit of excellence, and to invest heavily in the human element, the pilot and the maintainer, is the true secret of your power. It is not just the F-35, it is the culture that flies the F-35. To the young pilots entering the USAF fighter jets pipeline, do not take what you have for granted. Your debrief culture, your technical resources, and your freedom to tactically challenge authority are immense privileges. These elements are the result of decades of hard-won lessons and are the engine that maintains your tactical superiority. Cherish the humility and the rigor of the debrief. It is the most valuable tool in your arsenal. 10.4. Concluding with a sincere emotion. I am proud to be an ally of the United States. I am grateful to have witnessed a higher standard of aviation professionalism. I came to America thinking I was good, but America helped me realize the greatest thing of all. There is still so much to learn.